Hi, this is Marlene Green, and I thought it urgent to conduct this special interview for your benefit with a successful businessman, family man, and one of my dear business mentors, Martin Howey. I've known Martin for many years as not only a successful entrepreneur, but as someone who's a fanatic about health and fitness and being in shape. And when I first met Martin, I think he was around 62 years old. I did notice, even though I'm much younger than him, his muscles, and that he was in really great shape. And he lives an active lifestyle. But every time I see Martin, he's in really fabulous shape. And I was just blown away recently to learn that Martin has cancer. So this conversation we're going to have is for your benefit, and I do hope that you're going to take action as a result of listening to our conversation. So, Martin, welcome.
Well, thanks, Marlene. It's very nice to be on here with me as a guest. I'm very honored.
Yeah. So, tell me what's going on with you, because you're like the picture of health at 66 years old. Please share with everyone what happened and what your story is.
Well, thank you very much. You know, Marlene, this has been a very unusual thing for me, and it became a real shock when I found out what happened. I've had, as you well know, a very active lifestyle, as you've mentioned. I compete in all the running races and the bicycle races. I compete in triathlons. I go to the gym every day. I eat pretty clean. My weight in proportion to my height. I go to the doctor. They do blood pressure tests and all that. They say, well, you know, what are you doing? I mean, you've got the body of a 30-year-old and you're 66 years old. What are you doing? You've got to be doing something right. And so everything that I've done along the way, and this has been a lifelong quest for me, is to try to keep myself in great physical shape. Well, one day I found myself having trouble going to the bathroom. And I was straining and straining. I just really couldn't figure out what it was. I thought I must have some type of a bug. So I went to my doctor, my family practitioner, and I said to him, I have this problem. What do we do about it? And he says, well, I think what we really ought to do is get some blood samples and stool samples and find out what the problem is. So I went to the lab, and I did all of that work, and I waited to hear back the results. And one day I got a phone call a few days later, a voicemail that said, Martin, call this number, enter this code in, and we'll give you the results from your tests. Well, I did that, and the results were that both of the tests were negative. The stool samples were negative. There was no blood in the stool, and the blood tests came back, and everything seemed like it was okay. And that was the end of it. And I thought, but I still have a problem. I didn't go to my doctor to find out what my stool sample tests were and my blood samples were. I went to the doctor to find out, how do I fix this problem that I have? But the doctor just dropped me. So I called the office, and I said, I still have a problem. What do I do about it? I got a physician's assistant on the phone, and they said, well, you probably ought to find some type of a specialist. And I said, well, what kind of a specialist? Well, it sounds like it must be a digestive problem. You might want to find a gastroenterologist. And I had no idea what that was or where I even started. I said, well, do you have somebody that you can recommend? Well, we really don't have anybody. So I got on Google, and I started searching around, and I found someone who was fairly close to me. Didn't have any idea who they were, but I went in and I saw them, and the doctor talked to me, and he said, well, it looks like what we really need to do is a colonoscopy. And I thought, I didn't even know what that was. I'd never heard of it before, a colonoscopy. He did the test, and it was a very easy test to do. They put me out, and they ran this scope into my rectum and up through my colon, my large intestine, to see if there were any polyps. Well, the problem was they couldn't get it very far up there because when they got it in just a little ways, they discovered there was a tumor. And so a tumor is one thing, but, you know, they took some samples and some biopsies and took some pictures of it, and they sent the biopsies off to the lab. And the pathologist came back and said, well, the tumor that he has is malignant. Now, it could be benign, which means it's not really a threat, or malignant, which means it's cancerous. Mm-hmm. And we need to get in and find out more about this. So they did PET scans, PET scans, they did CT scans, they did MRIs, they did all the blood work, they did everything they could find, they did x-rays, they did everything to find out what this tumor was all about. Let me just stop here for a minute and explain that the object of the colon is to pull the water and the waste products together and form a stool. Now, the colon is about 4 to 5 feet long, and it's about 2 inches in diameter. And so it forms a stool that you eventually passed out as waste through the rectum. So what I found was the tumor that I had was all the way around the inside lining of this colon. And so it formed like a donut with a hole in the middle. Now, normally you have about a 2-inch colon. Well, this had reduced the hole, the path waste through, down to about pencil size. Now, I really didn't know what the problem was, so I went in, and bought some Metamucil because I thought I needed more fiber. And that didn't work, so I went to a Whole Foods store and I bought something even stronger to give me more fiber. Well, that was a wrong thing to do because what you don't want is fiber, because fiber makes a more firm and more solid and a larger stool. And so it was giving me real problems. And you've probably been kicked at one point in your life as a child in the rear end, where right in that little coccyx, the little bone in the back, and it gives you such a deep pain inside. Well, this is what it was like. Every time I tried to go to the bathroom, I'd try to pass this normal-sized stool that would normally go down through a 2-inch colon, down through a pencil-sized opening. It was just pain, and I couldn't get this through. What we found out was that not only was it around the inside of that colon, but it wasn't in the colon at all. It was in the rectum. And it's about 2.5 inches tall, so this is a huge tumor that I have. And this thing's been going...
2.5 inches tall?
2.5 inches tall.
2.5 inches tall. Wow.
2.5 inches tall, and all the way around, 2 inches around the inside of this colon, to where it shrunk down to I have like a pencil-sized opening.
Yeah.
And so now it's right behind the prostate and behind the bladder, and in a position where it's very difficult to operate. Then what we found also in some of these other tests is that the cancer has now spread into a lymph node and into both leg bones and into my pelvis, which is not good. It's not localized anymore. So now there's a situation that do we operate, do we not operate, can we even operate? What's the situation? So they're treating me every day with radiation. I go in every day for radiation treatment. And then I carry around a little device. It's a pump that fits on like a fanny pack around my waist, and it contains chemo. And then this chemo is pumped continuously up a tube that goes under my shirt and into a little port that's been surgically implanted in my chest. So it's underneath the skin and it's permanently in my chest. And every week I have to go in and they change out this chemo pack and give me new chemo and change out the needle in my chest. And so it's very inconvenient. I have about a 6-foot tube that goes from my chest down to this pack, and I curl it up and stick it in the pack. And then at night, I have to take this pack off and set it on a nightstand. If I take a shower or a bath or something, I have to take it off and put it outside. I can't get the port wet. I have about a 6-foot leak, so if I lay down and go to sleep, if I roll over, I have to remember which way I rolled over, so I reverse that when I want to roll over the other way. Otherwise, I get tangled up in this cord, and it can pull out. So it becomes very inconvenient. And everywhere I go, I have to carry this with me. And so it's become a real shock for me. Now, here's the interesting thing, Marlene. I have, as I see it, 2 different gifts that have been given to me, and I have an obligation. The first gift I have is that even though I have cancer, I'm able to work. My neighbor, who was a plastic surgeon, got brain cancer. And now a plastic surgeon is like very many other independent business owners. He really didn't have a business. He had a job. And he wasn't any different than a barber. If a barber goes to work and he doesn't cut any hair, he doesn't make any money. And the same thing with the plastic surgeon. He goes to work, and if he doesn't do any plastic surgery on anyone, he doesn't make any money. There's no residual income coming in. There's no long-term income coming in over a period of time. It's as soon as he does a procedure, he's paid for that, but if he doesn't do a procedure, there's no money. So when my neighbor had this brain tumor, he couldn't work anymore, so the income stopped. Now, I want you to picture a graph. And about halfway up the graph, we'll just draw a line straight across, a horizontal line across this graph. And the horizontal line represents your income. And your income, for most people on a job, is pretty stable. It might go up a little bit, but basically it's stable across the entire graph. Now, underneath that, let's draw another line that represents your expenses and how much money you pay out. Now, most people live somewhat close to that income line. Their expenses are about what they make. And so sometimes the expense line might go up a little bit over that line, or it might come down a little bit. Basically, you live and you expend about what you make. So those two lines pretty well track each other. Well, in the case of my friend, you take that line, the income line, and you draw it over about halfway across that graph, and then all of a sudden the income stops. And so it plummets to the bottom of the graph. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the expenses, as soon as that income line drops, the expense line goes sky high. It makes an upward turn because now you have expenses that you didn't have before. You don't have the income that you had, and now you have expenses that you didn't have. Doctor's bills, you have hospital bills, you have medical expenses, you have all kinds of things that are going on that you didn't have before. And now we have a real disparity between the income and the expenses. And it becomes a real situation if you don't have some type of insurance that will cover this. So what I really found was that the gift that I had, the first gift was that while my friend wasn't able to work and his income plummeted and his expenses went up, I'm at least able to work and do something, and my income stays the same, and although my expenses go up, I have some insurance to take care of it. Or I can increase what I do in my work because I have an independent type of a business, and I can increase the income that I have to cover the expenses. So that's the first gift, that I'm able to continue working and providing some type of value to the marketplace. The second gift that I have is that I found that the kind of cancer that I have is the second most deadly form of cancer. And so even with that, this is one of the easiest forms of cancer to detect and the easiest to cure if it's caught early enough. And so to me, just having that knowledge, it's a deadly form of cancer, but you can detect it and you can cure it. And most people don't know about this. To me, that's a real gift. Mm-hmm. So the two gifts I have is I'm able to work and I can continue doing something. And the second gift is I know that this can be prevented. And if you do have it, it's caught early enough, it can be cured. So those are the two gifts. So what's my obligation?